be here and be able to share my story, because if it wasn't for your organ donation and families who selflessly say yes, I would not be here today. Organ donation are two words I never thought about after getting my driver's license at age 17. Two words that now have become part of my life. Two words that have now brought us all together here today. I believe there's a day and a time that almost everybody in this room will never forget. My connection to organ donation began in July of 2015. I made a doctor's appointment because I was becoming extremely fatigued, my legs were swelling, and I was short of breath walking very short distances. I was diagnosed with a rare inherited genetic disease called alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency. Alpha-1 is a disease that can affect your lungs or your liver or both. In my family, it only affects our livers. I was 57 years old and a little confused. 30 years earlier, when my mother was diagnosed with alpha-1, my siblings and I were told that although we were carriers of the disease and could possibly pass the disease on, we were more likely not to get the disease. I was referred to a GI doctor for further testing. I will never forget my first visit to the specialist. After looking at my records and giving me a very quick exam, he rolled his stool across the room and leaned back against the wall and said, You have cirrhosis. You could have knocked me off the exam table with a feather. I was in total shock, as were my daughter and sister who came along to the appointment with me. We walked out of the appointment in shock. My head started spinning with everything that I already knew about the disease. My mother had it, also my grandmother, an uncle, and 2 aunts. Alpha-1 is a disease with no known cure. All they can do is treat the symptoms as they arise. A transplant is the final treatment for alpha-1, and not always a successful one. In 1992, at 47 years old, my uncle received a new liver, but sadly passed after only surviving 2 weeks. My mother was diagnosed at 58 years old, chose not to have the transplant, and the disease ran its course, taking her away from us at 64 years old. Prior to my diagnosis, I never got sick. I would see the doctor once every 2 to 3 years. I was completely independent and lived alone. I did everything and anything I ever wanted to do for myself or for others. I worked full-time, and I was physically active and as known to spend winter days up on my roof shoveling off the snow. At the time of my diagnosis, it had been 19 years since I watched my mother go through the disease. I knew firsthand what was going to happen to me and how sick I was going to get. I knew everything that could go wrong and how fatal this disease can be. The first year of my disease, I held my own, but only for that 1 year. Very quickly, my world came crashing down. The disease started taking over. I lost my independence and ultimately had to completely depend and rely on others. I was scared to be alone, but didn't want to bother anyone. I was scared of dying, but didn't want to worry anyone. Because of my disease, I lost my job of 14 years. I became confused. I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't remember the simplest things. I had to give up driving because I couldn't remember where I was going or how to get there. I was scared they wouldn't find a liver in time. My life became a constant whirlwind of doctor's appointments, tests, scans, and scopes as my medical team worked and treated each new symptom as it arose. My GI doctor told me my only job was to stay as healthy as I can. She said her job was to keep me healthy long enough for a transplant. If not for the help of my family and friends, I wouldn't have made it to the countless appointments, both in state and out of state, that helped keep me alive. December 2016, I was sick enough to be considered for a transplant. I went through the 2-day evaluation for a liver transplant at Leahy Hospital in Massachusetts. I was poked and prodded and scanned and tested and met with every doctor in every department to make sure I was both mentally and physically well enough for a transplant. The transplant surgeon made the comment that day that I needed to be on the list yesterday. He told me that a living donation was not an option as I needed a full liver. In January 2017, I was approved and placed on the liver transplant list By February 2017, after receiving a necessary vaccine, I was officially listed as active. On the day I was listed as active, I was told two things that I will never forget. One, to get my affairs in order. Two, I was told that when they called and said they have a liver available, that I was just to say yes, or I would die waiting for another one. Dying was something that was always in the back of my mind since the day I was told I had cirrhosis. From that moment on, I simply went through each day hoping to see another. When I got listed, my new focus became, when will the phone ring? I had my bag packed and with me at all the time, just in case. There are a lot of emotions when you have a chronic illness. There are even more and different emotions when you know you have a terminal illness. The biggest emotion is guilt. Knowing that a family has suffered a tragic loss and said yes to helping others causes immense guilt. When I was first started speaking today, I mentioned that I believe everyone has a day and a time that they will never forget. My day and time was Saturday, March 18th, 2017, at exactly 11:45 a.m. That was 2 years and 13 days ago. That was the day when I got the phone call that they had a liver for me. That day changed two families' lives forever. That's the day I got a life-saving gift from my donor, a 43-year-old gentleman in Rhode Island who tragically died of a brain hemorrhage. Before I finish, I do want to say thanks to my donor and his family for allowing me to be here today. Because of my donor, I've done many things that I never planned on doing. Although I never had a bucket list, I did have a list of things called the things that I'm going to do because I'm still here and can list. At 7 months post-transplant, I volunteered at my first New England Donor Services event, the Dempsey Challenge, where I made new friends and talked to a lot of new people. It was there I met Hallie Toomey. Hallie, for those who know her, is many things, but most importantly, she is a donor mom. I asked her about her son, CJ. I thought she was very kind to take the time to tell me about him. It was the first time I had directly heard from someone who was affected by the other side of organ donation. I was a complete stranger to her, yet she took the time to help me. With her encouragement and guidance, I was able to get through writing my first letter to my donor family. How do you put into words what being given a second chance of life feels like? I didn't want to upset the donor family by writing the wrong thing, but what was the right thing? What are the right words? It was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. At 17 months post-transplant, I got on a plane and went to Utah to participate in the 2018 Transplant Games of America. In Utah, I had the opportunity to meet other recipients, living donors, and most importantly, donor families. While there, we broke the Guinness World Record of having the most solid organ transplant recipients, 540 of us, in one place at the same time. When I got back from the transplant games, I turned 60. So I did what any 60-year-old, 17-month post-liver transplant person would do. I went skydiving. I currently mentor two ladies who are also diagnosed with cirrhosis. I share with them my experiences and act as a support as someone who has walked in their shoes. One of these ladies just received a living donation from her daughter and is now recovering from her surgery from January. Last November, after a 2-year hiatus, I've gone back to work full-time. Two simple words: thank you. Two words that will never seem like enough for what I've been given. To my donor family and my donor, my mother thanks you, my father thanks you, my sisters thank you, my brother thanks you, my daughter and her husband thank you, and my grandsons thank you. But most importantly of all, I thank you. And to all donors and all donor families everywhere, thank you.